Welcome to Mayo Clinic Q&A. I'm Dr. Helena Gazelka. Thanks for joining us today. The start of a new school year is always filled with excitement and anxiety. With COVID-19 this year, back to school is even more challenging for kids, teachers, and parents. How can you and your child have a healthy mindset for the start of school? Well, here to discuss that with us today is psychologist Dr. Craig Sawchuck. Dr. Sawchuk is the Division Chair of Integrated Behavioral Health at Mayo Clinic. Well, thanks so much, Dr. Sawchuk, for being here today. I'm excited to hear what you have to say about back to school. I've seen little hints of it here around Mayo Clinic as we're working with employees and the community. What basic advice would you have for us today?
Yeah, one of the big things that you talked about a little bit earlier was just uncertainty. We've all been dealing with uncertainty to a greater or lesser degree, and I think it's really important for us to remind ourselves that there's a whole lot of stuff going on with the pandemic that we can't control, but there's also some very actionable steps that we can control. So I think especially as we're facing the return to school, there's about four things that we want to keep in mind. One, the first thing is just be flexible. And we're not only talking about what we learn in yoga, but just really be flexible with the format of how we learn, whether it be in person, whether it be virtual, whether it be a hybrid, between the two. Just be flexible with that. It's all going to look different however we look at it, and it's also subject to change. So being flexible is really, really key. Another thing is to be optimistic. We try to do our best to keep a positive attitude, going forward. And it's really important, especially for parents and caregivers, to model being optimistic as we approach this new school year and just be open to essentially learning new ways of learning. But being optimistic is really, really important. And it's also be supportive. These are challenging times for us all, but we also think about just getting into that school environment, and we want to be supportive of all those steps and measures that people are taking to maintain safety. So whether we're talking about social distancing and proper hand hygiene and wearing masks, it's really important that we do our part as well to be supportive. And then finally, and this is easy to do, hopefully in Minnesota, but we encourage other people around the country as well too. Is just be kind. A lot of us are going through a lot right now. We actually have been going through a lot for quite some time. We're all experiencing distress to a greater or lesser degree. So try to maintain that kindness towards others, especially everybody working very, very hard to figure out not only work schedules, but school schedules to try to find a new way to make this work.
I resonated with what you said about uncertainty. That really resonated with me because I feel like the whole name of this game that we're in with COVID right now is that things are changing all the time. The advice we're getting is changing. What we need to do to manage this is changing. The knowledge about the virus itself is changing. And so that really makes sense to me, the need to be flexible.
Yeah, I tell you, uncertainty is kind of like the world right now is just like a snow globe. It's just kind of shook up, and the snow in the snow globe is the uncertainty. And when things really started to impact us, much earlier in the spring, towards the end of the winter and early spring, that was really tough. And I think psychologically we were thinking, okay, 2 weeks, okay, maybe 4 weeks, we can handle this. But then we've really kind of gone from a short-term acute care model to more of a longer-term coping model. I think many of us were hoping that the schools and work would be all figured out, by this point in time. But here we are, and there's still some uncertainty we need to get through.
You talked about mental flexibility, but also some of that yoga flexibility is probably a do about now if people haven't been exercising during COVID.
We again rewind the clock at the start of the pandemic, and some of the big things that we were encouraging people to do at the time, like maintain a good schedule, a healthy schedule, a reliable time that we wake up and get ourselves dressed, and getting out of the yoga pants, as we talked about a while ago, but doing all those healthy things during the day, like a reliable sleep schedule, nutrition, exercise, all really good to kind of keep going. There's also good opportunities actually to learn new skills right now too that can help act as, I think, very healthy pressure release valves. And this is one of the good things that we've seen coming out of the pandemic, that there's lots of free skill building things that are now available online. So whether they actually be yoga classes or meditation classes or even learning some mindfulness, we've talked on Mayo Clinic Radio before about free mental health apps are really, really good things. So learning new skills are always really good at this time. And then it's the healthy supports and staying connected. Folks have been so adaptable to try to bridge that social distance with video check-ins with people and staying connected with those healthy people in our lives. We're just having to do it differently, and then also making sure that we're reaching out to those people that maybe have a harder time being able to connect with others or may feel a little bit more isolated. So trying to maintain those connections with healthy supports. And I'll always kind of throw this in is watch what you're feeding your brain. So when it comes to the news and social media, it can be a little bit extra charged, sometimes, but usually about 15 minutes, maybe to about a half hour, once to maybe twice per day of media or social media. That's usually enough to keep you informed, but hopefully not so overwhelmed that you're marinating in a lot of that stress and uncertainty. But it is actually interesting because those are the things that we were recommending earlier in the pandemic, and those are the same things we're still recommending now.
I think the small doses of social media is a good thing. We all tend to be kind of tied to our phones now.
Very much
Craig,
so.
what advice do you have for students, for parents, for teachers on maintaining good mental health during this process of going back to school?
So a lot of those things that we just talked about in terms of those healthy routines and keeping up those healthy like pressure release valve, stress management skills, and those healthy supports, those are good things. I think when we start to look at how school is actually going to be going this coming fall, really in a couple of weeks, we're looking at different mental health challenges, I think, hitting each of those three areas. So if we think of in-person schooling, where some places will be doing it, I think you're going to be running into that kind of mixture of both excitement and fear. People are going to be at one level so happy to be around their friends and other things, and other people are going to be facing a lot of anxiety and worry about stepping into these areas. And we also think for our young learners too, they may not understand, how in-person schooling is going to look differently now, and needing to wear masks and maintain that social distance. So we always want to make sure we keep those lines of communication open, that we model these good behaviors that we know can be effective and helpful for those in-person schooling. For the remote schooling, I think one of the mental health challenges that we're going to be running into is a couple of things. One is isolation, and a lot of us have been dealing with that already, and many of us have tried to adapt as best as we can to things being more remote. So hopefully more of those classes that are going more towards virtual is that they're building that sense of community. So hopefully there'll be more of the chat room style where they can have a little bit more interaction and feeling connected. But we also got to make sure that we're looking outside of just the school format. Are there ways that we can encourage our kiddos to stay connected with, again, healthy supports and friends in their lives, also in a healthy and safe manner? So that social development and staying connected with people to reduce that isolation is extremely important. And we also think about, just like for our younger learners, again, that doing everything remote can be a real challenge, for them. So I think with our younger learners, and then also with our older kids as well too, we may have to look at that school day as being really kind of spread out and kind of pacing ourselves. It's kind of unfair to plop a kid down in front of the computer for 6 to 7 hours straight of being able to stay focused. So maybe pacing themselves along the way can actually be a good thing. And I think finally, another thing that we got to keep in mind too, some kids struggle more with just organization and being able to keep up with all their homework. And that is a different dynamic, whether it's virtual versus in person. So maintaining good communication with our teachers remains really important. And then the final challenge that we run into, both from a learner perspective and parents and caregivers, is that hybrid format, because boy, that can take so many different flavors, and the schedule can look very different between a caregiver or parent's work schedule. And how does that map on to, okay, do I need my kids at school on this day, or are they at home learning this day? And that's also going to be subject to change. So one of the big things that we recommend for folks to try to help all of our stress level is have just one giant chart and have that posted in a high traffic zone in their house, usually a kitchen, is a good one where we've got everybody's schedule on there, and whether it be our children's schedule, what days are they going to be in class, what days are they going to be more virtual and online, and our own work schedule as well too. And I know that's going to take a lot of work on everybody's part to figure that out, but having clear communication, a one-stop shop for our schedule in our home is actually a really good thing.
That's a really good piece of practical advice. And I liked what you said about uncertainty. Uncertainty isn't just about that we don't know what's going to happen next, but it's also, am I up for this? Am I capable of helping my child? I remember when my daughter was in junior high and trying to help her with her algebra homework. And I cannot even imagine having her home for an entire school year. She's now married and has a 5-year-old who should be going to kindergarten this year, and we're still not quite sure what's happening with that. But there's just so much uncertainty that things could change daily, that we may not be equipped for the task.
Once we get through this, and we will get through the pandemic, but look at the lessons learned and the resilience that we'll pick up along the way. I'm sure there'll be certain stressors that we're going to be dealing with once the pandemic is over that will be so much easier for us to deal with, because if we manage to get through the pandemic, we can handle, a lot of other life challenges maybe much easier.
That's a really good point. And it brings me to the last, one of my last questions for you is that how do we help our children understand that we're not always okay and that's okay? A lot of times our kids saw us going off to school, didn't really know mom and dad go off to work and they do their thing during the day and come home. But now roles are changing and the way we do things is changing, and it doesn't always feel okay. And I'm sure it doesn't to our children either.
And this all takes a toll on us, even with people that we look to that seem to be the most calm and the most cool and the most flexible and the most optimistic about these things. It all still takes a toll on folks, and that's why the line that you mentioned, Dr. Gazelka, is spot on in terms of it's okay to not be okay. Unusual circumstances call for unusual ways of responding, to it. However, we don't want to just say, well, it's okay to not be okay, and just going to leave it at that, because a lot of us are dealing with, to a greater or lesser extent, with stress or sleep problems, worry, new financial, struggles. Again, kids wanting to be successful in their schooling and maybe struggling with that as well too. So it's going to take a lot of adaptation, with that. But once we start to see a lot of those things starting to cause us problems in day-to-day living, it is unbelievably important that we reach out. So whether it be like a parent or a caregiver, we notice maybe our kid is struggling more or being more quieter than usual, or maybe even the opposite. Sometimes they're a little bit more combative, try to maintain that calm, stance, but also create an environment where you can talk about it. And likewise, we also have to take our own self-reflection to see how we're doing. And do know that help is available, treatment is available. I know we've also talked on this program before about challenges with mental health access, but I think one of the key things that, as we've seen a lot of schooling going virtual now and a lot of businesses going virtual now, a lot of therapy has also gone virtual as well too. So a lot of whether it be medication management or counseling, a lot of clinics are now offering video-based and telephone-based format to help maintain that social distancing. And many of these platforms have been very stable and actually very good. And I think that this is also another good thing that's actually come out of the pandemic, is that we can maybe extend our reach out a little bit more. But sometimes a good place to start if you're struggling is start off with your primary care team, family medicine provider, or your pediatrician. They're usually the most in the know of what are available mental health resources located right in your area.
Craig, what you said about that increased access, I do think that's one of the benefits of COVID. Um, when we're looking for the glass to be half full or the silver lining, we've started doing many more video visits here at Mayo Clinic, as I'm sure you have in your practice too. And I actually think it's been really well received by our patients.
Awesome. Well, even over the course of the interview, you're working on being more optimistic. So the glass half full and the silver linings, you're already doing it. So that's a good sign.
That's right. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with us before we go today, Craig?
Yeah, I just want to remind people again that we will get through this. And I know psychologically, it's always easier when there's a light at the end of the tunnel and also when there's something to look forward to. And I think that's been one of the big challenges, the pandemic, that light at the end of the tunnel of getting to the other side of this keeps seemingly get pushed further back, or some of the things that we would ordinarily look forward to, like going away on vacation or hanging out with our friends or even going on a date with our partner. A lot of that's been a lot more challenging for us, but do know that everybody at every level is working very hard to help us all get to the other side of this pandemic, and we'll get there, and we'll be all the better for it in the end.
Thanks so much for being here, Craig. Thanks to Mayo Clinic psychologist, Dr. Craig Sawchuck, having a conversation about how we can be resilient in the face of back-to-school issues during COVID-19.
Mayo Clinic Q&A is a production of the Mayo Clinic News Network and is available wherever you get and subscribe to your favorite podcasts. To see a list of all Mayo Clinic podcasts, visit newsnetwork.mayoclinic.org. Then click on Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and be well. We hope you'll offer a review of this and other episodes when the option is available. Comments and questions can also be sent to Mayo Clinic News Network at mayo.edu.